Okay, good evening, everybody. Roy Oberson and I welcome you to week 9 of our quarantine and week 8 of our class. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're all doing well this mid midweek of this week and ready to talk about alternative capital strategies and a little bit of work on the Electrics Incorporated case tonight, which should be beginning to haunt you in some respects. So here we go. Again, I am recording this session. So if you'd like to play it back or have questions, you can check in with me during our office hours or on Friday. Or for some of you, I know Friday is difficult. You can contact me over the coming weekend if you have any issues or problems you may have. So here we go. First off, as you can see, this is our agenda, and I got out a late, as usual, lately, a late introduction video to you all this week. Was posted late this morning. If you had a chance to look at that, fine. If not, please do. It explains a little bit about mergers and acquisitions. But in that, we talk about what we're going to be discussing. And most of you have posted your case number 3 work. Some are still on, have a little bit of extension into tomorrow. So once I get all those cases, I will post the grades no later than Friday with the solutions, because the solutions should help you in case you had some confusion about capital budgeting. And also, it might be a wise idea if some of you are still confused about capital budgeting to maybe use that as have a time to chat with me, maybe during our office hours on Friday or this coming weekend, making sure you're up to speed on getting ready to do the electrics case. Speaking of the electrics case, that will be due Sunday, May 31st, which is the last possible day of our spring term. So that's when that work is due. Tonight I am posting, and it's probably posted right now to Blackboard, case number 4, which takes into a case about alternative capital strategies. And I have extended the due date on that to Sunday, May 24th. So technically you have about 10 days to do that case, the final case of our class, case number 4. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on this evening, but also the problems and discussions we talked about in leasing, and the topics and discussions of tonight, chapter 18, 22, and into next week, chapter 24, are the topics of this case. And if you have a chance, that case will be, you can begin working on that this evening if you so desire, but after class, I would like. And then it is not due until the 24th of Sunday. So you have, I gave some extra days on that one, mainly because you're going to be doing the electrics case. And I know in some of you, you have other classes where your requirements are about just as great. So you're going to have a busy next couple weeks. So I wanted to give you a couple extra days on that case number 4. And we'll talk about that a little bit later this evening. And remember, if we get our grades and we get our case, all our work done on the 31st, you will have your grades posted by Tuesday, June 2nd. Tuesday, June 2nd will be the date that your final course grades will be posted to Blackboard on that Tuesday. If in fact you get your grades in faster, if you post your electrics case earlier and you get all your work posted, I will give you your grade quicker. My bargaining chip, as always, is if you do your course evaluation, you will get your grades posted on time. If you do your course evaluation, I know a lot of you have already done an evaluation this year, but this course evaluation is done at the end of the course. The link is in my Laverne under course evaluations, and I will post a link for that evaluation next week in our class. But if you do your course evaluations, you'll get your grade on June 2nd. If you do not, no worries, doesn't affect your grade whatsoever. You'll just get your grade probably 10 days later when the registrar posts it to Blackboard. I mean, to your MyLaverne. So that's the timeline over the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions or concerns about this timeline, please let me know and we can work around that, fitting your schedule and your issues. Okay, all right, that's that. Let's see how everybody's doing tonight. Everybody's all accounted for. Angel, why do you have two squares? You have one square for your video and one square for what? Microphone? Is that how that works?
No, I use my laptop so that
That's
I
right.
can use the video because it's easier for me to use my big screen to follow along with your stuff.
I see. Okay, that makes, I always have to ask you that, and it's always the same answer every week. I should be able to figure that one out. Okay.
I'll
Thank
come
you.
up with something more exciting next week.
No, that's fine. I don't need anything more exciting in my life these days. This is dealing with politics and both state government and Laverne politics is enough for me. So don't worry about that. Okay, we're bringing up our famous whiteboard, and I'm going to put a couple of things on this whiteboard, and then naturally we'll post this to our Blackboard later on. But again, we're talking about alternative capital strategies, and we started this discussion last week about different ways that companies can find different ways of financing themselves besides the traditional go to a bank, issue a bond, issue stock, and that sort of thing. Different ways of which companies can get capital. And the first way we talked about that last night was leasing. Or last week, excuse me, was leasing. Off to a bad start already typing. Leasing. Oh my God. Rick, get your acting gear. Okay, leasing. And leasing is a form of having the ability to use assets and without buying them, without purchasing, without acquiring capital to pay for them. What are the alternatives? I mean, what are the positives of leasing? The positives of leasing are it's cheaper, usually. It's cheaper to lease. Usually you can acquire an asset and the monthly payments of the lease are cheaper. You can manage those costs maybe a little bit better. It's cheaper. Also, it gives you access to better, efficient assets. You have access to better and assets that you would not be able to get before. More efficient, better assets than you might be able to afford. You have access to those better. All right. Second, and finally, the advantages to leasing as you can turn them around. There's turnover. You can get assets, a new asset every 2 years, 3 years, depending on the lease. You can turn over those assets quite easily by coming to the end of the lease and then getting a replacement. The turnover of the assets is sometimes very positive. If any of you have ever bought a car on a lease, you get a 4-year lease, you can turn that car in after 4 years and get another car. So my phone is going off. I'm sure your phones are too. There's an Amber Alert going on right now. So there we go. Isn't technology wonderful? So those are the positives of leasing. There's also negatives, all right? Negatives. And the negatives are usually that you lose a tax shield. You lose a tax shield. Now you do get somewhat of a tax shield when you do have a lease and you're making lease payments. Those are a tax deductible business expense and you get some type of tax shield with that, but you have more tax shields when you own a lease, all right? When you own a lease, you have a tax shield for the depreciation. You have a tax shield if you're borrowing money and you have the interest expense. You have a tax shield maybe when you salvage that asset at the end of time, you get a break on the profit. So sometimes the negatives of that are you lose the opportunity to get a tax shield. That's some of the negatives about that. Another negative of leasing is that you You have the ability to control that asset. You can do whatever you want with it. You can upgrade it, you can paint it, you can fix it, you can do whatever you want. When you have a lease, you can only use the asset to what the purpose of: car, equipment, building, whatever. You can't modify it. You're not the owner. You are not the owner. So that's a negative thing about leasing, is you're not the owner. You cannot have control over the asset. And that can be a hassle after a while. Geez, if any of you have ever had an apartment at some time in your life and you go, geez, I would love to get a new refrigerator, or geez, I would love to get new carpeting or paint the place. And you ask the landlord or the owner of that asset and they would say, no, we'll wait for another year or so, or nope, can't do that. You have no control over that when you're leasing or renting in that case. And that's something that can be a hassle, the lack of control of how you do that asset. And finally, another negative of leasing, if you decide to lease an asset instead of purchase it, is you lose, it has many things to do with your credit. By owning assets, that substantially helps your credit more than it does not. You will find if you start owning assets, your credit is probably going to, especially if you own those assets and you paid off the debt or you manage them correctly, your credit rating will go up faster because you're handling assets on your own. Yes, if you have a lease, you make payments, and that does play into a little bit of your credit rating, but more so if you own assets. It influences your credit a lot more, your credit rating, your FICO score if you're an individual, but mainly for companies, it's your credit rating. That affects your ability to manage assets, which helps your ability to get better credit. So you lose out on that if you just have lease payments. So there's positive and negatives to owning assets and not owning assets. And you have to fit that into your schedule, into your culture, into your ability to pay. Usually small businesses are going to lease. They don't have the ability to get a tax shield. They don't have the ability to borrow money. So they lease. But as your business grows and you have more volume, you have more cash flow, and you have the ability to go out and get capital because your credit rating is getting better, you then can go out and acquire assets and not worry about leases anymore and have the ability to purchase those assets and control those assets the way you want them to be. And that's some of the big advantages of owning assets, is you have control. So the positive and negatives of leasing are that, and that's part of a strategy of how you want to control the assets that you use. Another alternative is to actually, this is talked about in chapter 18. Now, if you're a privately owned company, if you're a mom and pop business, one of the ways that you can control your destiny is going out into the public and issue stock, an IPO. You go out and make your company public. Make it public, all right? You issue stock to take the company public. And boy, is that a big turnaround in your company to do that. For if you're a privately owned company, you've been financed either by profits or individual bank loans, and maybe some Shark Tank people, private investors, are helping you out. A lot of times they call them angel investors, members of the family who help you out. But the amount of capital you can raise is rather low in that regard because it's too high of a cost. If you ask a homeboy for $1 million for your business, they're going to want a lot of control over your business, all right? If I go out and issue stock, I have numerous owners where they're not going to have as much influence as one homeboy, but at the same time, I can go out and attract hundreds of thousands of investors by issuing stock in the public markets. That's why many companies, as they grow and get bigger and bigger, in the last 10, 15 years, Facebook, companies like Facebook, Twitter, a lot of tech companies. How about Beyond Meats a couple years ago? Spotify, all those companies, as they get popularity and they need more capital to expand their markets, they go out not to the Shark Tanks, they don't go out to banks, they go to the public markets and issue stock. And here's an explanation of that right here. Initial public offerings are our way of going out and getting capital by going to the public markets and saying, hey, what do you guys think my company is worth? What do you think? And the company and the government agency that controls this is the Securities and Exchange Commission. You have to prove to them that you're worthy. Now, here's the downside of going public and issuing public stock. You got to have lawyers. You got to have accountants. You got to have investment bankers. You got to have people who know the markets because let's say I'm a mom and pop business and I make a product and I do it very well. But if I want to go out and get capital in the public markets, I have to prove to people that I do it well. I have to put together a business plan, a business model. I have to put together a plan that tells the people that I'm honest. I have to do I'm looking for a word and it escapes me right now. Here it is. I have to do my due diligence. All right. The due diligence of proving to people that I'm worthy of taking their money. That takes lawyers, that takes accountants, and it's very expensive. You have to go through a series of interviews and selling ventures to prove to people that you're worthy of taking their money and managing it. You have to go into the security markets and prove that you're viable to issue public securities, public equity. That's not easy, and it takes a lot of money. Going public, you can raise a lot of capital, but at the same time, it's very expensive, all right? As I said earlier, most companies at the beginning are financed by the owners, the people who created the business. They're funded by venture capital funds, shark tanks, all right? But then you start going public when you have to, I was going to use an expression that's not good. You have to open up your hood of your car. You have to open up the hood of your car and show people what's in the engine. You can't get away with just saying people, oh, I know what I'm doing, everything's fine. You have to allow the public to see your company, how much you plan on paying your people, how much you plan on operating the business. This is very important. And going public is a very important aspect of that is you have to prove to the public you are worthy. Okay? So one of the advantages of going public, the advantages of issuing stock in the marketplace, you diversify your ownership. You spread the ownership amongst many stockholders. You have more access to cash, more access to liquidity, because more people are giving you money because they want to own your business. All right. Also, it helps your reputation. Banks are going to lend you money easier when you're a public corporation. Why? Because you're bigger. You're established. People know of you. People know exactly what your business is about because you have to tell people what your business is about. Going public establishes a value of your company. When Facebook went public years ago, one of the biggest problems they had is determining what is our company really worth in the market. What do people really think we are worth? And for Facebook, they took a hard lesson. They thought they were worth more than what the public thought they were worth. Their stock went down after they issued the stock because people thought the company wasn't as worth as much. Now it's gone up and it's done very well in the future. But what does the public think you are worth? That establishes the value of your stock. Okay. Also, stock and going public makes you attract better employees, talent, by giving them stock options, by giving them the ability to make money more than just getting a paycheck. But the good thing about that, it kind of postpones them getting the money until much later on once you establish the value of the company in the market. And also it establishes customer recognition. A lot of people never heard about Facebook, except if you lived in Boston and New York City, until they went public. Because then they took that capital and expanded Facebook all around the United States and eventually the world. It gives recognition that the company is now a player, now provides products and services that many people want. So it's going to attract investors. So going public establishes your name. There's a lot of disadvantages of going public though. You have to you have to hire many people to produce the necessary reports that you have to do. Every quarter, you have to file reports with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Every quarter, you have to come up with a plan for the next 12 months and make that public. Every quarter, you have to show your investors how you're doing. Every year, you have to produce an annual report, a 10K financial report. It goes on and on. And also, when you're a public corporation, you have to file the rules and regulations of the country you're a corporation in. You have to file HR guidelines. You have to file environmental guidelines, employee guidelines, many, 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 many regulations. And that's a hassle of going public, but that's the price you pay for getting that initial capital. Also, all the time, all you're doing is making sure your investors understand what you're doing with the company and how you're doing it. If any of you ever watch the news channels, CNBC, Fox News, Bloomberg, every morning they have interviews with a lot of CFOs, CEOs every day, and those CEOs and CFO are getting the information out to the public so they know what's going on. You have to do that. Many times, if you're a manager or an upper management of a company that's a public corporation, people get to know who you are. I mean, everybody knows who Warren Buffett is. Everybody knows who Jamie Dimon is. Everybody knows who Elon Musk is, right? They are the public face of a corporation, when a lot of people don't know who runs the private corporations of America. They don't have to be public. Nobody needs to know about them because they don't have to be out there. But if you run a public corporation, you're out there in public. It's just like if you're president of a university, everybody knows who you are. So being one of the disadvantages of going public, if you like to run things quietly and privately, you can't do it that way. That's a big disadvantage of going public. So that's what's talked about in Chapter 18. What's the nature of going public? It provides you with growth, fast growth, capital, selling your stock. Let's say Jesse and Alice are looking to invest some money, and they want to put some money into a startup company. A startup company means a company that just released stock to the market, an IPO. Now, the company hasn't established any credibility. They have, excuse me, they have the idea of their plan in the market. You kind of know that their product is cool because you've heard about them, so you're interested in investing in them. But can I trust investing in them? That's why you have to go to their prospectus. You have to go to their business plan. You have to go to their website. You might have to go to do a little research on their company. And that research is provided you with the 10K report that they file with the SEC. So when Jesse and Alice decide to invest in this company, they're going to go to the stock market and give that company a bid of a price they think the company is worth. $20 a share, $40 a share. And then whether the company will accept that is what they feel they can get for their money in the marketplace. And that's how that works. That's a very simple explanation, but that's generally how it works. The public puts a price on the stock. The company either accepts that or not, or who's ever selling the stock in the market says, yeah, I think that's what it's worth. And then you can own the stock in the company. But if you undervalue the stock and you don't think it's worth as much, you might not be able to attract a bidder, a seller. And so these are the things you have to worry about when you go public. And then once you own the stock, the company has to perform year in and year out, because if they do, the price of your stock will go up, you'll get dividends, everybody's happy. So that one of the first phases of a company to establish themselves as a public entity is to go out into the market. But then we have another case of public ownership or public change, and it's this. Oops. It's called an LBO. What's an LBO? A leveraged buyout. A leveraged buyout. This is going exactly the opposite of what we just talked about with an IPO. And a IPO is going public, selling your company to the public. An LBO is taking a public company private. Taking a public company private. They're sick of being owned by investors like shareholders. They're sick of having to file all these regulatory reports and everything. It's called a leverage buyout. And what it is the management of the company, management buys out the stock or the equity of the company. The management buys out the stock from the shareholders. Now, where does management get the money? This is where the leverage part comes into. The management uses the assets of the company as collateral to borrow money. They use the assets of the company as a way of providing the collateral to get the money to borrow, to use that borrowed capital to buy out the stock of the company and taking it private. All right. Michael Dell of Dell Computer did that a few years ago. He got sick of bankers and investors telling him what to do, so he said, the hell with this, I'm going to take my company private. And what he did is he took out borrowed money, banks lent him money, he put up the assets of Dell Computer as collateral, and he took the capital and bought out all the shares of stock from the shareholders and went private. Now he's going back public again. He's decided, well, I need more capital for future things I want to do. I'm going to go out and issue some more stock and become a public corporation again. But many times companies go private because the management thinks they run the company better than what the board of directors and the shareholders tell them what to do. So they take the company private. And that's called an LBO, a leverage buyout. The leverage is using the assets to give you the leverage to acquire capital in financing, and then use that financed capital to buy out the shares of stock of a company.
Professor?
Yes.
This is James.
Hi, James.
I've kind of wondered that before, as far as the buyout from, so if you take the CEO, like you mentioned, of Dell, I was kind of wondering how that legality works. Does the ownership then fall to him personally, because he's using the assets of the company as collateral? Those assets were acquired through public offering. So how is it that he's able to use that collateral for kind of personal ownership?
Well, as manager, as the CEO of the company, he works for the stockholders. He works for the board of directors, and if he comes up with a deal that gives them money, they say, oh God, you're going to offer us that per share of stock. Remember, the board of directors is shareholders too. If you're going to come up with the money to buy us out, take it. Go ahead. We're going to make money on the deal. So if you feel that you can get yourself so leveraged up to the eyeballs to pay us off, go ahead, do it. We don't care. As long as we get our money, you do whatever you want with it. So that's the general feeling behind that. And when the management takes the company, it's not just one individual, it's probably all the VPs and all that. When the managers take it private, in other words, the bank, the lending is in their name. As they are now the owners of the corporation. So they now have their own private finances wrapped up in this too, and they now own the company, and they're responsible to pay this money back. And so the legality of it is, the legality of a corporation is the ownership is owned, the company is owned by the shareholders. If the shareholders say, give us a price, yeah, we'll take it. Good luck. You're on your own now. It's just like if you own a house. If you own a house and the house cost you $200,000, but over time that house increases in value, and somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'll give you $600,000 for your house." you'll say, no, this is my house, forget it. But then the next day somebody says, I'll give you $700,000 for your house. Take it. I'll take the money and run. That's exactly what a leverage buyout is. You make the deal so attractive for the shareholders, the owners, they'll say, all right, I'll take your money. Adios. So that's how it happens, James.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess. So it is really contingent on a board decision. You can't do it without.
That's right. There was a great movie many years ago. Trying to shoot. It was called, it was with Danny DeVito. It was just on TV the other night called Other People's Money. And in that, it was an entertaining movie, but it was about finance and how a company was trying to take over another company. And they're using public money to do that. So the other company, the company that was fighting this takeover, said, well, all right, we're going to take the company private. We're going to find people who are willing to lend us the money so we can buy these shareholders out so they won't be taken over by this corporate monster. And that's how it is. The shareholders control the board. The board controls the direction of the company. But the board represents the shareholders. If the shareholders say we're getting a nice price for this stock, the board will say, if the majority of the shareholders want it, we'll do it. And that's how it works. And now the management of the company is stuck with that. And now they got to deal with it. Many times the companies, after doing an LBO, the management will sell off parts of the company and use that sell-off cash to pay off some of the debt and then keep the part of the business that they want to run. And that's what usually happens. Companies break up after they get LBO because they have to pay off huge amounts of debt that they needed to buy up the company. So then they'll sell off parts of the business and operate that way. If you ever watched that famous movie of 25 years ago with Michael Douglas called Wall Street, Michael Douglas was one of those people who took companies private and at the same time spun them off in order to finance and pay off the debt he acquired to finance those. He spun them off, and that was a great example in that movie, the Wall Street, which was a few years back. So that's the happenings of how this all works. I have a chat question. Let's take a look. Michelle remembers Wall Street. Oh, wow. Look at that. That's a movie that's been around for a while. But that's a good movie of explaining this stuff. And so that's what Chapter 18 is about, is when companies need to get capital, one of the first steps they do, if I'm a privately owned company, is to take it public. Sell the value of the company in the public and get that capital, and off you go to the races. But then vice versa. After a while of being in a public corporation, some companies say, enough's enough. I don't want to be run anymore by my board of directors. I have better ideas about how this company should run. I'm taking it private again, so I'll do an LBO.
I have a question kind of piggybacking on James's question.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like ultimately it's up to the board of directors
Yes.
for when the company wants to go back to being private. So it sounds like there could be like some negotiation back and forth, maybe.
Oh, a
like
lot of negotiations. Yes.
Okay. And then my second question does it always have to be a loan, or does it ever happen where like the company has the assets to pay off all of the shareholders, or is it always a loan?
It's usually 80% a loan, because here's why. If you have an existing company and you start selling it off to pay off shareholders, well, the sell-off of the assets is going to reduce the value of the company. And so a lot of the shareholders are not going to want that deal, because technically they're getting paid by making the company smaller. And that's kind of it's like comparing apples to oranges. It's not going to work that way. So in most cases, usually you have to acquire capital and then give top dollar for all the assets of the company. Then it's up to your responsibility to manage those assets however you see fit once it goes private. The only other the other 20% of that is, was this Angel?
Yes, it was.
Angel, the only alternative to that, the other 20% is many times you go private by doing a combination of finding somebody to come in, some high roller to finance going private, to put up some of the money, and then they'll become a partner of yours. And then also you also sell off, borrow on some of the assets. So it's a combination of somebody from the outside taking over. There's a couple big names about that, and now I have a brain freeze. So the guy who does that, who's famous for that, he owns the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, and he owns half of Las Vegas. What the hell is this? Carl Icahn. There it is. That's Mr. Carl Icahn, if anyone's ever heard of him. That's his big method of operation. He goes to companies who are not doing very well, or at the same time are having investor relations problems. He says, "Oh, come on in. I'll put up 20%. I'll put up a couple $1 billion. Give me, and I'll help you take the company private. But then guess what, guys? I got 20% of the business, and I'm going to be running the show." And that's what Carl Icahn has done with a lot of companies. That's how he got control of Las Vegas. He went to a variety of different companies way back in the 1980s and 90s and took them private into his realm, into his company, because he had the capital to help them go private. And that's one of the major ways of doing that, is you have a high roller come in and provide the capital who will help you go private. Okay? Good questions. Okay, so that's the nature of IPOs going public and LBOs going private. And that's a topic that one of the questions on case number 4 this next week is question number 2. If you were creating a business now, today, would you? Why or why not? How would the topics and discussions that we have had in class influence and guide your strategies? What type of business would you choose? How would you finance? For a business startup, that would be your greatest fear, and why is how you finance. If you go private, if you're privately financed, well, who's ever supplying that private financing is going to want control. You lose control of your business idea. If you decide to go public, you have to give up control, because you have to get capital from outside shareholders who are going to want a board of directors telling you what to do. I just answered part of that question, but you can elaborate from that more. But that's one of the questions on the case is, if you want to start a business today, how will you finance yourself? How will you go about setting that up? And how will that work? Kind of put yourself in the shoes of a company today like, who's the company that's thinking about going public now? God, boy, I've got a brain freeze tonight. I can't think of it. But if you've got a company today and you have a great idea for a business, all right? Let's say you have a company today that's very close to finding the vaccine for the coronavirus, COVID-19. Let's say you're a biotech firm. You're held privately. you're a startup, and you're about 6 months to 9 months away from creating a vaccine for the virus. Whoa. How much money is out there on the horizon for you? All right. Now there's going to be competition, because there's going to be other companies out there who are going to come up probably with the same vaccine at about the same time. How are you going to get into that market? How are you going to get out there? How are you going to distribute the product? You're going to require a lot of capital. Now, do you want to keep control of your company? How are you going to keep control? You want to be the decision maker? It's how you finance that capital, publicly or privately. When Mark Zuckerberg took Facebook from private to public, he told the investment bankers, I don't care how much money you raise, I just want to own 51% of the company when you're done. So they issued only 49% of the capital value of Facebook, because Mark Zuckerberg said, I want to make my own decisions. I don't want shareholders or board of directors telling me what to do. So he set up the financing to keep control. Very important. When Ford Motor Company in the 1920s went public, Mr. Ford, the original Henry Ford, says, after I'm dead forever, I want my family to control Ford Motor Company. They will make the decisions on the board because my family, my descendants, and right now it's the great great grandchildren that are on the board of Ford Motor Company, they make the decisions. Now, here's how he did that. He took the company public, financed it with public stock 100%, but he issued a separate type of stock called private ownership stock that the Ford family would always control. And that private ownership of stock has 50.5% of the voting stock of the company. So you can have all these hundreds of thousands of shares of stock, but this separate private stock that's still owned by the family controls 50.5% of the votes of the company. Even though they only own about 5% of the company, he set the business up that the voting shares are in the majority of the family. So from the 1920s till today, Ford is still managed by outside people, but it's controlled by the family. Interesting. So that's some of the key highlights. If you want to make sure, if you're an individual who has a great idea for a business, how are you going to keep control and at the same time acquire the capital to do that? The Ford family created the Ford Foundation, and it's the foundation that controls the voting shares of the stock of Ford. Mark Zuckerberg said, I don't want a foundation. I just want to own 51% of the stock. So they only issued 49% of the stock value to the market. Mark controls the rest. So every company, every way has their own little ways of doing that. And it's an interesting thing to track and follow. Okay. So that's the topic of chapter 18. All right. Now we're going to get into mergers and acquisitions. This can get very technical, but I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. But a merger and an acquisition goes through multiple levels. And if you looked at that video I posted in our introduction video, that's the case. But I also want to now show another video that's going to highlight this, and it's rather short, but let's take a look at this video here. It's in our week 8 file folder in Blackboard. It's called Mergers and Acquisitions. So let's take a look at this. Hang on, I forgot to share this with you guys. I'm surprised nobody yelled at me there. So let's share this. Here we go. Alice gave me the long look. She's right. Here we go. All right. Now we're sharing. Here we go.
This video segment discusses mergers and acquisitions in the context of strategic management. Merger and acquisition activity is extremely important in strategic management as we continue to see larger and larger deals in front of us. One of the more recent in the acquisition area is that of Google's proposed acquisition of the Motorola cell phone business for $12.5 billion. This signals Google's desire to further diversify away from its search engine business into an area it thinks has great potential for profits. It's instructive to differentiate between merger and acquisitions because they are quite different. In a merger, what you'll have is two firms of somewhat similar size that just combine their assets, and their names typically become combined as well. You may recall the failed merger some dozen years ago between Daimler and Chrysler. Their names became merged. Acquisitions are quite different. This is a situation where you find a larger or more cash-rich firm buying a smaller organization. The smaller organization then comes the subsidiary of the larger organization. If the Motorola acquisition goes through, Motorola will become a subsidiary of Google. In the not too distant past, Kraft paid $20 billion to purchase Cadbury. Kraft is a United States convenience food manufacturer, and Cadbury is a confectioner into chocolates and chewing gum, and they are located in the United Kingdom. Kraft paid almost $20 billion to purchase all the assets of Cadbury. In the business press, we quite often see merger and acquisition activity discussed interchangeably, but these terms mean something very different, as you can see from this and from this slide as well. In the situation of mergers, you have a situation where either the names become combined or one of the parents may become the dominant player, and they're simply named after the larger or the more dominant organization which comes through in a merger. One of the parents, regardless of how their name changes or does not change, usually emerges as the dominant management team. I don't know what the case in Sirius XM radio is, but I do know that Daimler, a German company, became the dominant management team of Daimler Chrysler some years ago. In acquisitions, you have a situation where the acquirer, which was Kraft Foods in this case of Cadbury, just buys out all the firm's stock. So they bought all of Cadbury stock for nearly $20 billion. And these types of activities can be either friendly or hostile for the acquiree. There are several types of merger and acquisition activity, and I'm going to detail 5. Vertical activity in mergers and acquisitions could be simply to buy a supplier or customer. So they're vertically going forward or backward to streamline their cost structure. And Johnson & Johnson acquired some time ago Mentor, which is a latex glove company, among other things, to complement its products to become a supplier to other divisions of Johnson & Johnson, hence streamlining its cost structure. In the case of horizontal merger and acquisition activity, we see a situation where you merge or acquire a competitor, and we've seen that in the recent past in so much as that the Dutch firm InBev bought out Anheuser-Busch, thus reducing their competition to some extent. Product extension is a situation where you're buying complementary products or acquiring them to fit your portfolio, and in this case Kraft's acquisition of Cadbury is a perfect example of complementary products. It also exemplifies market extension, which is where you want to go into different markets. If you studied the Cadbury Kraft acquisition, probably the main reason that Kraft wanted Cadbury so badly is that Cadbury does very, very well in some emerging markets where Kraft does not do very well. And namely, those two markets are India and Brazil. Cadbury does very, very well there. Kraft has had minimal success and hopes to piggyback off Cadbury's leverage in those two large emerging economies for Kraft to do well. And that's market extension. And then there's also this unrelated firm of merger and acquisition activity. We call it Conglomerates. Merger and acquisition activity, and this is a constant strategy that General Electric undergoes. General Electric, if you look at their web page or their annual report, they are into a wide host of products, from light bulbs to appliances to jet engines to medical imaging products in the healthcare industry, and many more industries as well. So it buys firms that are quite different, but at the same time, it diversifies their total risk by being involved in a lot of different industries. The logic behind this related merger and acquisition activity, when you buy something that's related or you merge two firms that are related, what you hope is that you have value creation, and that is what's hoped from the merger between Sirius and XM. They need to create value because both firms were losing money. And we examine this when talking about the value chain. Part of that value creation is going to become from cost reductions, hopefully through economies of scale, or a larger new satellite radio organization being the new merged company. And also another value creating activity we see called economies of scope, and that is situations where firms can share competencies, and really this goes back to the value chain as well. They can share branding, name, content, subscribers, etc. There are some implementation issues in mergers and acquisition activity. no better illustrated than in the case of Daimler and Chrysler. And that's in cultural differences. A German organization merging with a U.S. organization. Merger and acquisition activity always requires the merging of two different cultures, whether they be from two different countries or from the same country. You're still going to have two different and often quite disparate organizational cultures. That was a big problem for Daimler and Chrysler. Cultural merging involves a number of things. Among other things, it involves the combination of elements of two different cultures, management styles, products, customers, etc. It's interesting to see what's going to happen if the Google acquisition of Motorola happens and the Kraft acquisition of Cadbury, as of this speaking of late 2011, is already complete, and we still have not seen yet the full effect of the combination of both cultures. We do know in the case of Kraft that Cadbury has fought this over in the United Kingdom because they're not happy about an American company buying out their company, and many are unsure about their stability as an organization going forward, thinking Kraft might take the chocolate company and move it back to the United States. So it's difficult, costly, and it's not always possible to pull off a merger and acquisition from the implementation side. One last thing I'll say is that merger and acquisition activity is kind of risky, but it's especially risky in the international side. Research shows that 70% of all mergers or acquisitions that take place between firms from different countries are going to fail. So if you think about that, your odds of making a merger or acquisition work when you have headquarters from two separate countries, your odds are not very good. This video segment discusses merger.
Okay. Now, that is a little dated, as you can tell by some of the companies, but also it gives the basic definitions of mergers and acquisitions that are talked about in Chapter 22, the economies of scale, the merging of cultures, the trouble with international companies merging with American companies. These all are big problems, but also it's also creating other alternatives or other things going on here. And let me highlight those. Let's take Amazon, for example. 10 years ago, did anyone ever hear of Amazon? You know, how did Amazon get so big so fast? Okay, well, the technology had to meet their business model. For many years, the technology wasn't there for have the sophistication of having online purchases of hundreds of thousands of products. Now the technology caught up with them about 5-6 years ago, and they grew. How did they get that technology to grow Amazon and be able to develop their website? How did they get that technology? They bought it. They bought it and they took over a company. They bought the technology, all right? How did Amazon get to be able to sell different products? They bought Whole Foods Market. They bought Whole Foods. Now they're in the grocery store business. How did Amazon become one of the leading studios in Hollywood, producing hundreds of television shows a year and movies, and basically now owning the prime communication method of video? What did they do? They bought a movie studio. All right, they bought a movie studio. So then they don't have to spend the capital to develop grocery business. They didn't have to spend the capital to develop the technology. They didn't have to spend the capital to develop a movie studio. They acquired it. They bought it. And then they fit that into their business model of attracting different types of customers all around the world through technology. And next thing you know, Amazon owns the friggin' world. They acquired that technology. They acquired movie studios. They acquired these things. Chat question. Thomas, When they talk about culture, do they mean organizational culture or social culture? They mean both, Thomas. The organizational culture, an example of that is, and I'll get back to Amazon in just a minute. Thomas says it's a social or an organizational culture. A few years back, you guys probably, some of you weren't even born yet, but how did Mr. Hassey get on the internet? America Online. You got mail. Remember that? That was the first time I ever saw the internet, was through American Online. And American Online took off like rockets. So then there was a company called Time Warner. Time Warner makes Time Magazine, Warner Brothers Studios, Sports Illustrated. Time Warner owned CNN. Time Warner said, oh, we now need to get our products, our platforms to the internet. Why don't we merge with America Online? What a great idea. American Online now became part of Time Warner American Online. The person who founded American Online now has a board seat and is a CEO of Time Warner. When they had their very first meeting in New York City in, trying to think, it was around 1985, 88, they got together, and the American Online people came from Palo Alto, California, where they had beer bong parties every Friday afternoon. They didn't have to wear shoes. They could wear sandals to work and had long hair and Hawaiian Tommy Bahama shirts. They flew to New York for their first meeting with Time Warner, whose offices were outside Central Park, where you had to wear a dark suit and white shirt and tie every day to the office. And here all of a sudden, on one day, these two cultures got together. A friggin' disaster. Time Warner says, I'm not working with these people. They don't know, they look like a bunch of bums. American Online people said, I'm not working with these stuffy old cougars. Forget this. And it quickly unraveled. A great idea for a company, but the cultures, these organizational cultures, no way. And then you have social cultures. If a company merges with a company from overseas, from another country. I don't know if any of you have ever toured Europe, probably won't be for a while now, but if you ever toured Europe, one of the interesting things about in Europe, you get up in the morning and you start your day, companies don't open up till noontime. They don't open up till quite later in the day, but they stay open till 10 o'clock. But then here's a weird thing. At 3 o'clock, they go to lunch and they don't come back till 6. It's a weird culture of how they do business in many other countries. And many companies, if you want to decide to merge with an Italian or a European company, you're going to have to deal with these social cultures of the environment that they work in those countries. That sometimes can be a disaster. Organizational, social cultures, and that's right, Thomas. Those are two examples, and there's many of those happen every day, especially in the organizational culture. Can you imagine University of Laverne merging with Harvard? Both institutions are great, but at Harvard, they're so stuck up. I'm not even going to get there. They're very stuck up. Can you imagine Professor Hassey teaching a Harvard class? Oh, Mr. Hassey, you're not our Harvard type. So what the hell are you doing here? Hey, we're merged. You gotta work with me. I'm a professor at Laverne. No, you don't. We don't want you around. Get out of here. That's a problem. Cultures, a big deal. So
Professor
Amazon,
Hassey, yeah, I could relate to it because I work for Warner Brothers. So we struggled that when AOL and Time Warner merge. So we don't even like the technology because the email we were not used to doing. You got mail.
Yeah.
We were in Microsoft, so we worked backward with the AOL mail because there was a lot of stuff that we couldn't save. So yeah, I mean, I can definitely say it was, as an employee, it was a big struggle. Really, can't imagine even the big company.
How long ago was that, Alice? What years were that merger taking place? Do you remember?
Well, it was like back in 1990 something, because we did, Warner Brothers has two mergers. We just got bought by AT&T.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was during the 19 something,
okay.
You know, and then I know it was just going through all that, and it's even, we even argue about the name.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, yeah.
we want to, like, because we were 50-50, so it's not like one over the, like right now we have no choice. AT&T dictate everything, you know.
Yeah.
So it was a very different situation.
Yes.
It was interesting seeing through all these merger.
Boy, you've been around the block, so you know where all the bodies are buried around there, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I love, you know, in Time Warner, the building was in Central Park, is in the Olympic
Yes,
Drive.
I've been
So
in that
it's,
building.
yeah, and it's very nice. When we go to the meeting, we would dress up in suits. So it was that culture,
Yes.
very different, very professional. And
Yes.
you know, all the time with AOL, it was like, oh no.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's a perfect example of organizational culture and how companies have great products, great ideas, and be a perfect idea for a merger, but they're just run differently. And that can be a big reason for the collapse of that. And in the long run, that's what happened. Both parties ended up pretty well out of that deal, but it was not a good fit, as you just said. You're exactly right. Okay, good. Very good point. So yeah, and one last point of all this is, let me just give you this one last example of acquisitions, and this is more in tune of an acquisition that we usually gets the most of the press and a lot of people hear about, is called hostile takeovers, right? A hostile takeover, which is a merger that the other company wants no part of it. It's a hostile takeover of a company. And that happens quite a bit, and it happens a lot in the old days of Microsoft. Microsoft was just a software idea for a software called an operating platform. Boy, am I going to date myself here, and you guys probably won't know anything I'm talking about. But their original money was made in development of what is called DOS, Disk Operating System. God, am I old if I know that. This is how computers ran way back when. DOS, all right? And then Microsoft said, okay, DOS is great. We're selling it to IBM. Back in the 80s and 90s, IBM was the main manufacturer of personal computers. Apple was still, you know, in its infancy. And so Microsoft sold the DOS operating system to every IBM computer that was made on desktop management. And that's how Microsoft got their money. But quickly, Bill Gates and Paul Allen said, wait a minute, this is going to last us about 3 years, and then we're going to be taken over by IBM, or our business model is going to be old. That'll be the end of Microsoft. So then where do we go next? And so Microsoft, we need to have the applications that will run on this DOS and run on the software. And so what they did is they went out and acquired companies that developed spreadsheets and they called it Excel. They went out and purchased companies that did word processing, and they called that Word. They went out and purchased companies that developed database management. They called it Access. They called it PowerPoint. They called it Outlook. You think Microsoft developed all that software and they put it into a package called Office? That's when Microsoft started taking over the world, when they created this package of applications that now could be involved in working from a computer. That made the computer now to be able to sit on our desktop here tonight, because now we can do so many different things using those applications. And Apple took off on that regard, and Apple developed an user-friendly operating system called Windows, and then Microsoft stole some of that idea and they created their Windows, and now we're at the point where all this stuff is in the cloud, and here we are in 2020. But Microsoft acquired all these applications that we're using on our computer today by hostile takeovers of those companies. They didn't want to sell to Microsoft. But Microsoft told the shareholders, you guys are nuts. You're going to pass up this price for your stock. And they convinced and took the shareholders to disagree with the management of those companies and took them over and acquired. How do you think Google has Google Maps and Google Meets and Google Toilet, or whatever they have? All right. Google acquired all this software, all these applications. They bought them. Just like Amazon, just like Microsoft. So most companies, when they know their business model is beginning to age, they want to keep relevant, Time Warner did the same thing with American Online. They wanted to be relevant. They wanted to be a player. They needed the internet to do that. So when you acquire either hostile takeover or merger takeover, this is what happens. You have to fit that into your culture. Now, in the course of Microsoft, they just bought them out outright and fitted into Microsoft. Amazon, the same thing. This is what makes the world go round. And I was going to ask a question to everybody tonight. Have you ever been involved in a company on the other end of a hostile takeover? Usually you lose your job. They let you go if you're at the other end of a hostile takeover. Because why? They already have HR people at their company. They already have accounting people. They already have manufacturing people. They don't need you. They need the product. They need the market. They need the industry. That's why they're buying you. So usually if you're involved in a hostile takeover, it's adios amigos. Here's severance and we'll see you later. So that's the dark side of acquiring mergers and acquisitions, is the hostile takeover, but that's what many companies with capital do. Watch what happens in the next year or so, people. Watch what happens to the airline industry. I bet you at the end of this, we're going to have 2 airlines. Trust me, we'll have about 2 airlines. At the end of this, we might have maybe 4 television networks. Watch what happens with Fox and CNN. Watch Apple buy one of those organizations. Watch Google buy one of those organizations. I don't think they'll buy Fox, but watch the consolidation of the cable industry and the communication industry. A lot of people and Yvonne can attest to this, a lot of people are unplugging from their cable systems. It's too expensive. A lot of people are not going to have too much money for $200 a month cable bills or internet bills in the next few months. There's going to be a consolidation of the communication industry. There's going to be a consolidation of the entertainment industry. The rich will buy up the not so rich. And you're going to see a consolidation in that. You might see a couple of automobile companies go down the tubes. Leading candidate, Ford Motor Company. They could be bought out and taken over. It's going to happen. There's a lot of big money companies out there with cash on their balance sheets. They're saying, oh, maybe we want that market. Let's go out and just take over that company, because companies now are getting weaker because of the result of the economy we're in. So watch for a consolidation in all kinds of industries. How about the business you're in? Are you having a tough time now? Is your company struggling? Do you don't have much cash on your balance sheets? Makes them a prime target to take over. And that's what you got. Yes.
So I have a question kind of to hostile takeover. I mean, I know that any takeover has to be approved by the shareholders or the board. Is it that a hostile takeover for like Facebook, for example, you mentioned that Mark Zuckerberg owns 51%. I would assume the hostile takeover is not possible because it's his decision.
Unless they give Mark a price that will just blow his mind away.
But then would it be considered hostile at that point because it's...
No, because he'll have to agree with it.
Okay.
So a hostile takeover is when management has very little stake in the company, all right? And they're running the business and they're probably doing it very well. But then the shareholders say, you know, you're doing a great job, but geez, Bill Gates just came to me and said he's going to triple my price of the stock in one fell check. You know, guys, I don't really care how great you run the company. I'm cashing out. Adios. Yeah. That's a hostile takeover.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And that happens. Because when Microsoft took over, it was, and I'm going to date myself here. Anybody ever remember the software VisiCalc? VisiCalc. Microsoft bought that company. VisiCalc did not want to sell to Microsoft. So what did Microsoft do? The management told them to go to hell, get the hell out of their office. So what the next day, what did Microsoft do in the Boston Globe newspaper in Boston? Took out a full page ad to the shareholders of VisiCalc saying, you guys know what your management team just passed up? You're going to triple your price of your stock. We're offering triple the price. And your management team said no. Next day, VisiCalc was sold to Microsoft. The shareholders said, management, you're done. See you later. We're selling out. And that's exactly what happened. They went around the management team and went directly to the shareholders saying, here's a check, guys, you want it? And that's what happened. That's what Amazon did with Whole Foods. The Whole Foods people didn't want originally to sell to Amazon. We're not that type of company. We want to keep it mom and pop. We want to keep it the way we like it. Amazon offered them so much money, they were crazy. So now all those people who own a majority stake in Whole Foods are now sitting on the beach in Brazil, in the Bahamas, are clipping coupons off their bond investments in Palm Springs. They don't have to worry about running Whole Foods anymore because they got cashed out and they don't have to work anymore the rest of their life. And that's what big money can do. And you're going to see a lot of that happen in the next year or so because a lot of companies are going to be weak and they're ripe for takeovers and they're ripe for buyouts. And that's what's going to happen, a consolidation. If we have a Republican in the White House, they'll let them get away with that. If Joe Biden or a Democrat comes in the White House in November, they're going to put the bricks to some of that. They're going to disallow those types of takeovers as illegal, as monopolistic. It's going to be interesting to see how all this develops over the next couple of years as the result of this economy. Okay, pretty good discussion for this first hour. Let's take a break. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about the Electrics Incorporated case. Going to look at our checklist and see and fill in that checklist a little bit about what's going to happen with some of the variables and some of the information we are gathering for the Electrics case. After we do that, we're going to talk about a little bit about Chapter 24 bankruptcy as a feed-in to your reading next week and your work in case number 4. So we'll talk about that in about 10, let's call it 10 minutes at 7:25. So I'll see you guys all in about 10 minutes. Okay, adios. Okay, so let's get going here. Here is a checklist of things that you need to have available to put this all together. Now, remember, as a lot of you were working on case number 3, you were gathering that data, putting it into the capital budgeting and determining some information. We have a chat question. Thomas says he always wakes up in cold sweats because of these cases. Thomas, go to bed sober. Stay away from the alcohol and you won't be waking up with cold sweats. And that's a joke, so sorry about that. All right, yes, yes, I know. I was a graduate student at one time myself, and then I know what all this entails, so I apologize. Darlene, are you okay tonight? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's get back to this checklist of the Electric Corporation. By gathering this data and then putting it into taking these pieces and putting it into this puzzle to come up with the secrets of the Electrics Incorporated decision making of what controller, what motor they should build to maintain maximum success for their company. So as you did in case number 3, and by the way, Yvonne will probably ask this question before the end of the night, but Yvonne, I will have the case number 3 grades and solutions posted before our office hours on Friday. Fair enough? All right. First of all, the WACC. I've had 2 students give me the calculations of their WACC, so I'm not going to give the answer to the WACC calculations, but remember the WACC is a combination of the cost of debt after tax plus the cost of equity in relationship to the company's risk and the risk in the market, all influenced by the percentage of the capital structure of the company. Three things you have to do there. Determine the capital structure of the company, determine the after-tax cost of debt, and determine the cost of equity. That gives you the cost of capital. That cost of capital is your discount rate in the problem. You'll be using that discount rate in two main areas. First of all, to help you determine the warranty cost per unit. You need that rate to determine that. Also, you need that rate to determine your discounted cash flow, to determine your net present value amount. So that WACC is at the top of the list because you can't do two other main things without that information. What is the investment? Well, I don't think that's any secret. It's $17 million, right? Now, I'm not letting the cat out of the bag by that, giving that answer, okay? Again, if any of you are following along, I'm on page 5 and 6 of your electrics case. I'm looking at exhibits 1 through 4 where this data is supplied. If you have not, and I urge you, if you have not looked at this yet on May 13th, 2020, I strongly urge you to start looking at this very quickly, more importantly by the weekend, to give yourself ample time to get this done by May 31st. Trust me, start working on it now. The project life. Oh, I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag here. By its 8 years. 8-year project. So you're going to have 9 columns, year 0 and year 1 through 8 in your spreadsheet analysis. It's an 8-year project with the investment year being year 0. Again, you've seen this before in our work. The annual depreciation, I will not tell you. All right. It is the MACRS, marginal accelerated cost recovery. You're looking at a class of assets that has an 8-year calculation per year as the percentages for depreciation. And one of the reasons you don't have to worry about this is there's 0 salvage value. There's no salvage value you have to build into this. It's straight 17 million bucks over 8 years. If your depreciation at the end of your spreadsheet for 8 years does not total $17 million, then something smells in Denmark. And it's not tulips. All right? So just make sure, where am I picking up these ideas? You have to make sure your depreciation depreciates the $17 million investment in year 0 through the 8 years, and it needs to total $17 million. Remember, people, I do not want pennies in this analysis. Whole dollars, please. The only decimals I want is in your internal rate of return calculation, your percentages. I do not want pennies in any shape or form. All right. What are our basic base analysis variables? Right? I'm going to go through these. If you read them, you've already started working on them. This can confirm that. All right. Our sales. Now remember, we have 3 scenarios in this case: weak, average, and strong. The first analysis you should do is the average analysis. That's your base analysis. That's the analysis you will use to base your answer on in some respects. That's the analysis you will use in your sensitivity analysis. That's the analysis that will drive your weak and strong analysis as well. You start out here. The base analysis. What are the sales under the base analysis? $9,200 a unit. All right. And you're going to sell 40,500 units every year for 8 years. All right. $9,200 per unit, 40,500 units every year for 8 years. Okay. The variable cost. All right. As we discussed last weekend, I would take these variable costs I would take these variable costs and split them into two areas. Why? It just makes the interpretation and the reading of the case and the data you need easier. So you should have two variable cost lines. The first variable cost line is for your motor. The motor. And what are your variable costs for your motor? Labor, $4,250 a unit. Plus the parts of $2,500 a unit. All right. That's for the motor. Those are your variable costs for the motor. All right. In addition to this, you have a variable cost for the controller. The price per controller and installation. All right. Add this to that. So for the one analysis for the CTX13, it'll be $1,280 a unit. For the other analysis, for the MT78, it will be $1,260 a unit.
Okay, so Professor, that was kind of going to be one of my big questions. Was I was thinking we had to do a base analysis just for the motor, and then two other separate ones for each of the controllers. So really it is, we have the base with the motor for one controller, we have the base with the motor for the second controller. So we'll have two base analysis.
Why?
Is that right?
No.
No?
Why? You're trying to determine the total return for the each product. One product has a motor with one controller.
Right.
The other product has a motor with another controller.
I think that's what I was saying, but maybe I said it wrong.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
we're going to do two base analysis, one for each controller.
Yes, as I mentioned last week when I
Okay.
totaled up 9 different spreadsheet tabs, you're going to have 3 for the CTX, you're going to have 3 for the MT, right? Base, weak, and strong.
Right.
Okay, so yes, each product has the motor. For the motor, the parts and the labor are going to be the same for both. The differences in the analysis and the determination, the main differences are in the controller costs, right, and the warranty. But I want to keep the warranty separate, and just as if you've gone through this problem, you'll understand why we keep those separate.
Well, I guess let me just make it, so for each controller, you're saying 3. So it's the base analysis, the sensitivity.
Why don't you say it for each product?
For each product, okay.
Okay.
The CT and the MT.
Right.
So for the CT product, we have a base analysis, the capital budget
Which is
analysis.
the average.
Right. Oh, and then I thought we did a scenario and a sensitivity for each product.
Well, you do.
Okay.
Because you have to do the weak analysis and the strong analysis to determine the scenario analysis, correct?
Right.
Then you have to do you have the base analysis or the average analysis already done, and that will be the base to do the sensitivity analysis.
Okay. No. Okay. Then I'm right. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's basically what we did for case study 3,
Exactly.
but we're going to have 2 separate ones with 3 parts to each.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Good questions. So there's our
Professor?
variable.
Professor?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was kind of on the same wavelength with Yvonne. And then as far as the worksheet or the tab, so are we putting them all on, like, were we going to have one worksheet? Do you want both, like, say, both risk analysis on one sheet, then both return analysis on another sheet? How do you want them?
Well, first of all, I want one file. And within that
Yes.
file, you will have
Yes.
tabs. Each tab is a sheet.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you should have one tab telling me what's your WAC calculation.
Right.
Then you'll have a tab giving
Okay.
me your base average analysis for the CTX 13. Then you will have a tab doing the weak analysis for the CTX 13.
Okay.
Then you will have a tab for the strong analysis for the CTX 13.
Okay.
Then you will have a tab for the sensitivity and risk analysis for the CTX 13. And probably within
Okay.
that tab, you will also put in a summarization of your scenario analysis.
Okay.
Then you will start again. You will have an average base analysis tab for the MT78. You'll have a tab for the MT78 weak analysis. You will have a tab for the MT78 strong analysis. Then you will have a tab for the MT78 sensitivity analysis, of which you'll probably, as I just said, you'll put your scenario analysis in there as well. How's that sound?
Okay.
All on one file.
That's how I
do
pictured
not,
it.
I do not
Okay.
want, no, I just, because I'll get it anyways. No matter how much I say this, somebody's going to send me 20 friggin' files. All right. I want one file. It's happened every year for 15, 17 years. So somebody just send me one file with a series of tabs where me as the assessor, as the person who wants to see your analysis, can go run to each tab and see what's cooking.
Okay, so now
Okay.
I'm
Thank
very
you.
much more clear, because now we're doing a capital budget analysis 6 times, right?
Yes, yeah.
2 bases, 2 weeks, 2 strongs. Got it.
Yeah. Basically, we've done that in the prior cases. We kind of just did it
Did
all
once.
Yeah, we did it all off the base analysis and then it's created the tab.
Right.
Now, and the reason why I do this, Yvonne, and it makes sense, if you notice, there's going to be different selling prices under each scenario. Where in the other cases, we had the same selling price, it was just a different volume. See that? So that's why I want to see the physical tabs for each one of those scenarios. Make sense? Cool.
Professor, sorry
Alice.
to interrupt.
That's
So
all right, Alice.
as far as the units for these variable costs, we cannot assume 40,500 units to apply directly on these variable costs, right? Are we supposed to split 50-50 for the motor? Like I know the price, but what are the unit are we supposed to use?
The reason why it's shown on that exhibit number 1, it tells you that the $4,250 and the $2,500 and the $1,280 are all based on the units of output at each one of those scenarios.
Okay.
So if you're using the average, you're using 40,500 times those unit variable costs. If you're doing the weak analysis, you're using 40,000 times those unit costs. Make sense?
Okay. Okay.
So in other words, what you do, you'll have a variable cost line. All you have to do is add up 4,250, 2,500, and 2,880. That total is your variable cost per unit for that line for that particular product. When you do the MT78 spreadsheets, you'll have 4,250, 2,500, and $1,260. Make sense?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I am telling you guys way too much.
Thank you.
I'm going to shut up pretty soon. So that's one of the variable costs. Then there's the second variable cost, and this is for the warranty. The warranty cost. All right? The warranty cost is kept separate because the warranty costs involve a period of time, and it's a separate calculation. You might want to, just for the sake of clarity, creating another tab just showing me your warranty cost calculations. if you want to, but you can include it on the spreadsheet in your cell, however you want to do it. But because the warranty is not just adding up $75 and $90 for the CTX warranty is equals to $165 for 5 years every year. The MT78 warranty is equal to $175 a year for 5 years. But here's the reason why we use present value. You're getting these costs out into the future. You have to present value them back to today in the year that you're producing that particular product. That's why you're using present value, the discount rate. So you're going to have to do a little like mini spreadsheet showing year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, I got to shut up. I'm giving you guys way too much information. All right. You have to determine the present value of those 5 years, 165 and 175. And also don't forget inflation in that calculation because you're going out into the future.
Professor?
Yes.
You mentioned showing your work around present value and for warranty. Are you okay if we showed our work but used present value formulas, or are you looking for a table?
No, I'm looking for present value formulas. As a matter of fact, if you're looking at costs going out in the future, I would use that NPV formula.
Right. Right. Okay. I understand. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. Chat question here. Let's see what this is all about. Hang on. Now you're telling me, Thomas, you can't see the screen. Is that correct? Can you guys see the checklist?
Yes.
Thomas, can you see the checklist?
I can't.
Tom?
Oh, there it is. I found it. My fault.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's a biggie. All right. Oh, first of all, let me do this here so you guys can see this better. Let's get rid of this yellow, I guess red here. Let's do this here. And make that black. There we go. All right, that's easier. Let's do a little cosmetic surgery here. There, that'll help.
We can use the spreadsheet from our case 3, right? I mean, once we tailor it to this case.
Yes, but also what I'm finding, Roman, and you're doing case 3, like the other example, a lot of you are still changing some of the formulas. A lot of you are using a template from a prior case, but you're not paying attention to the formulas and the variables that are given. All right. And especially in this problem where there's a new variable cost line, there's different types of depreciation, you got to stay on top of it, and that so it's opening up to mistakes when you do use that. Yes, I would use that template, but you're going to have to be very careful making sure you have the correct formulas and the correct variables in each of the cells, correct? Okay, because I think Roman, we went over that this past weekend, and we saw some of those problems in the case 3 in your work where you had the wrong formula because you're using a template from a prior one. I think that was the case. So you got to make sure about that. Take your time very slowly doing the base case average analysis. If you do that right, all the rest of them will be cool. You just have to change a little bit of the variables. But take your time to do the original ones, because if you make a goof on that first one, it's going to, if you copy that over into the other scenarios, that goof is going to continue, and then you'll be wrong. So you got to make sure about that. Okay? That's a good point, though, Roman. Thank you. Isn't this fun? I'm telling you, this is this is great. This is enjoyable. I need some psychiatric help, big time. Okay. And Yvonne, you look very serious tonight. Go to the refrigerator, grab a cold Coors Light, bring it to your desk, and sit there and just sip on the Coors while you're doing this class. You'll feel much better. Trust me. I can't believe I'm advocating alcohol. That's not very smart. Okay. Now we have another chat. Who's the motor mouth here? James had a blue moon. Ooh, James is a high maintenance drinker, a high maintenance beer man. Blue moon. Not a big fan, but I respect the choice.
Hey, it's what was in the refrigerator. I didn't really have a lot of choice.
All right. Okay. All right. So let's get back to this warranty where I'm giving basically writing this out for you guys how to figure it out, and I'm going to stop right here on that one. But again, you're going to have a warranty line in your analysis where it's going to combine the motor and the controller into one number. And then you're going to determine the present value of those 5 years, and that's going to be the same number for every year 1 through 8. Why is it going to be the same number? Because you're going to include inflation in that calculation. Then you don't have to worry about inflating it like you are the other variable costs every year. You're inflating it in the original calculation of the 5 years. So you don't have to worry about that. That's going to make you guys think a little bit now. All right. May I move on? Roman, may I move on? Shake your head. All right. Yvonne?
Yeah, so you already have a warranty cost down below. Is this the same as the warranty cost that you just did?
Yeah, I did. Sorry.
Okay.
My bad. I'll wipe that out. Jeez. Particular, aren't you? Okay.
Are you going to post these notes as well?
Well, let me show you something. If everybody's looking at their monitor, I will post these if I get the right amount of cash. See this here? This is money. This is, probably can't see it because of the light. There it is. You can see it. This is cash. Come up with the dinero, come up with the euros. You'll see these numbers. I take Venmo. I take PayPal. I'm teasing. Yes, James, I will post these after class tonight. Yes. Okay. Fixed cost. All right, fixed cost, remember we've seen that before. It's a flat amount of money. It's not based on output. It's not taking a cost times the number of units. It's a flat cost, but you will be inflating this, all right? You will be inflating this, and the fixed cost is the same for every scenario, $9.5 million. $9.5 million fixed cost per year for 8 years. By the way, let me go back to this. What is our inflation rate? Our inflation rate is 3%. I should include that here. I didn't include that. All right. The inflation rate. It's 3%. You guys probably know that, but let's make sure I put it here. Okay. So the fixed cost that doesn't change with output is 9.5 million. Working capital. There's another cash flow item in year 0. And with sales changing every year by inflation, you're going to have a working capital change every year. And our working capital rate here is 10%. Just like you did in case 3, just like we did in some other work in the class, it's based on the next year's sales figure, and in the final year, you add it all back in as positive cash flow in the final year of the project. We've done that before. You shouldn't have too much problem with that. So, ladies and gentlemen, you now have all the variables to put together into your capital budget analysis to determine the net yearly cash flow. Oh, did I forget one? I did. Sorry. Taxes.
Can I ask a question?
Just a sec.
Sure.
Your tax rate. I forgot that one. Tax rate is 35%. Okay, ask your question, sir.
I may have not heard you correctly, but under where it says warranty cost, CTX 13, $165. That 165 is what?
Really, James? Really? Exhibit.
Well, I'm asking because I'm looking at Exhibit 2, and I'm looking at average cost $90 and $100.
Yeah, but what does it say for the motor?
Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I didn't say that to be a jerk. I just said, really? That was a nice really. So remember, you're determining the cost of the warranty for the product is the motor and the controller. So the motor is $75, $190, so that's $165 for the CTX. And for the other analysis, the MT is $75 and $100, $175. Make sense?
Yeah. So no, this is helpful. I do understand the basic arithmetic, but I guess I was approaching it from adding the motor warranty into the motor as far as variable costs. So keeping the warranty separate, or should you come up with a warranty cost for both, combining those two?
You can do that if you want to do it that way. That I don't have a problem with that. That's your way of interpreting that and doing that. Go right ahead. There's nothing wrong about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. Okay.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Net yearly, yes.
So a couple of pieces of data that we had previously, like for case study 3, we shouldn't expect to see those here or need them here.
Example.
Annual change in sales, 2%. That kind of stuff.
Yvonne, what did that 2% represent in case number 3? One word, it begins with an I.
Inflation then.
Yes, and here's inflation here.
Okay.
Okay.
Another name for that.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Very good. Okay. 3%. Why did I tell you that? I should have made you figure that out yourself. Son of a gun, Rick. I'm getting soft in my old age. Okay. Good questions all. That's where I'll stop tonight. Next week, we're going to take a look at the risk analysis. What's going on there? Pretty well answered scenario tonight, but we'll take a look at that next week. Okay? Everybody a little bit more comfortable after going through this? Maybe? Maybe not?
Can I ask a question again? Sorry for all the questions. Would we go over how to add in inflation into a warranty calculation, or is that something we should just try to figure out?
That's something you have to figure out.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here's the only thing I'll say about that, James. Don't overthink it. Keep it like you've handled inflation in other parts of our class discussions. Don't overthink it. Keep it simple. It'll be the right way of doing it. Okay?
Thanks.
Okay.
I have a question, same topic. So I might be overthinking it. But I'm just looking at my spreadsheet from this last case. And as Yvonne pointed out, the inflation is on the spreadsheet, the annual change in variable cost. So can you, and maybe I just missed this part of the explanation, but why with the warranty do we need to find the net present value with the inflation when on all these other variable costs we included inflation as part of the calculation?
All right, I'm going to sound Angel. You are making sense, but I'm going to be a little bit blunt and a little bit of a snob in this answer. At this level of study, Angel, you should be able to figure that one out.
All right.
Okay? Sorry. Remember, the warranty, all right, I'm going to say this because I just felt like a jerk saying it that way, and I apologize, but I wasn't being a jerk. But at this level of study, remember, Angel, the warranty cost is not based like the other variable costs where it'll inflate every year for 8 years. The warranty cost is for 5 years. 5 years from the time you produced, from the time you sell the product, 5 years, that's the warranty. It doesn't go out 8 years, doesn't go out 2 years, it goes out 5 years. So you're going to build, so every unit from year 1 through year 8 is going to have the same 5-year warranty. So why not include inflation over those 5 years to show the proper warranty costs spread out, taking into account inflation over the course of those 5 years. Once you do that, every year it'll be the same because you've already included inflation as part of the calculation. Where the other costs are not like that. They're for every year, and going out year by year, they'll be inflated. Make sense? But that's my rationale behind that. If you inflate the warranty every year for 8 years, you're overstating the expense. I'll say that again, you're overstating the expense, and then your analysis will be flawed, off. Okay? Michelle, I got your chat, and I hear you're having Wi-Fi problems. No worries. I'm recording this, and I can post the recording tomorrow morning, and then you at your leisure can watch that recording again. So don't freak out because you're having Wi-Fi problems. Okay. I noticed that last night or
It's
yesterday
okay right now.
I noticed that yesterday when we talked, you were going in and out and crazy. So yeah, that happens. Happens to me. And Thomas, I will talk to you after class if I got your chat. We'll talk after class, Thomas. Yvonne, I'll meet you at the local pub an hour after class. Okay.
I'm gonna need it.
Okay.
No, so you
Yes.
did say, I think last time, that while you wouldn't look at our base analysis for case study 3, you would seek review if we had questions for our final electronics.
Yes, I will. And the reason
Okay.
for that is one of the first things I'll look at if you give me your draft is how you handled that warranty question.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. That's to be fair. Okay. So next
Can
week.
I ask one more question?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
No, if you say sorry one more time,
so
I'm going to slap you. No question is bad. Go ahead.
So I understand that we're working on inflation kind of baked into that warranty, and that would be the variable cost figure. Is it safe to assume that our fixed cost and sales price is increasing by 3% annually?
I think that's a safe assessment to say, yes. Like it has in other problems, yes.
Okay.
Okay, good question.
Thank you.
All right. So next week, we'll stop here. I'll post this. Let me save it first. I'll post this to Blackboard, to the checklist area of the case, so you have it. And then next week, we'll talk about the risk analysis side. Give you guys a week to handle and begin to look at case 4, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And also give you a week to get those base, weak, and strong analysis done. And then we can go into the risk side of the review. Okay? And we'll do that next Wednesday. Fair enough? So let's move on from this. Now, before we look at the case, I want to do something to change the pace here, all right? Let's take, this is not a break, but it's a mental break, I guess you could say. All right, up here on the screen, up is coming something. Oops, not that. You should all see in front of you a poll. Everybody see it? Alice, you see a poll? Here's the question. I want you guys to fill this out. Are you nervous about your financial future? Multiple choice. Yes, no, maybe. Stress because I have no control. No worries. Fill out, pick the multiple choice on this, and let's see what our class, again, this is anonymous. I don't know who's answering what. Let's answer this poll. Are you nervous about your financial future as of today? Okay, Tom, I'm missing one. Do people have access to answer this? Are you on your phone or something? I'm missing one of the 10. Did everybody ask their question or answer the question?
Sorry, it's me because I'm logged in twice.
Okay, then don't worry about it, Angel. That's okay. You ruined it for everybody. No, I'm teasing. Okay. Now let's take a look at this. All right, as you can see, are you nervous about your financial future? Yes, a third. No, almost half. And no worries, 22%. Pretty good. I thought I'd have some saying stress because I have no control. I thought that was one some people might answer. But at the same time, that's pretty good, okay? So I've been doing this to a lot of my Zoom classes today, just asking different questions, basically to the makeup of the student. The undergraduates, I would not be asking this question. A lot of them don't even know what the hell they're doing tomorrow, let alone in the future. But for you guys as working adults and adult learners, I thought this was a prudent question just to ask. And again, I'm not sharing this with anybody. I'm not sending it to University of Laverne so they can hound you about this. I'm just doing this internally just to ask this question. I might do it again next week with another matter. Is just kind of something fun to do. And this is what our class has said about the future. And it's it's roughly about 50-50 if you take into or a little bit more on the no side if you take the 44% and the 22%. But that's pretty good. So that's a good indicator that you guys are optimistic mostly, and ready to tackle what comes down the road, and that you're fairly secure about that. So that's a nice thing to do. So I wanted to do this tonight. I know it's kind of corny, but it's a nice little break of being able to do this. So thanks for filling that out. Thank you. That's a good help. Thank you very much. Okay. Now let's get back to this task. Okay, I've posted this evening your quiz number 4. All right. This is not due until May 24th. So you got to not include today. You got 10 days to do it. And I wanted to give you plenty of time. And some of it's kind of touchy-feely. Some of it is discussion about what we've talked about in class. And so I want you to put this together. There's no format. Just answer the questions however you see fit. And it's talking about alternative capital resources. So again, this is running concurrently with your electrics work, and I apologize for that. But at the same time, it shouldn't take you too long to do this. One of the questions, the one I'm going to go over in detail tonight, is asking you to interpret and think a little bit. And that's the purpose of that question. And so that's probably you'll spend the most time on that. And that's question number 3. But again, it's a 3-question case. One is asking you about your interpretations of why leasing is an advantage for a small business. We've talked about that. Elaborate on that. Question number 2 is, I've mentioned this earlier in class tonight. If you were creating a business today, if you wanted to start your own business today, be it whatever, if you were starting your own business today, what would it be, and would you do that? Would you start a business today? And I imagine today, in today's economic environment, it probably would be no. But some people would still want to start a business today because they're getting into something that's clean. All the suckers are out of the market. It's fresh. Might be a good time to start some business, but again, it depends on your business idea. What's the business going to be? I would not probably be opening up a business today about investing in people taking investment in your company. That might be, people don't have the money to do that, but you might be coming up with an idea or a business today that you might have an advantage because you know about it and the nature of the environment now, it might be. So I want you to answer that question if you do that. I give a reference to some of the articles we read in week 6 as some of the discussion posts of those strategies. All right, that's question number 2. Question number 3 is a little bit more, let's call it involved. It's about bankruptcy and restructuring, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in just a minute. The name of the problem is it worth more dead or alive? You're going to be looking at a company that's on the verge of bankruptcy. And you're going to help this Alex Peterson decide whether you should let this investment go or is there still time to restructure this company. All right. I want you to read this, take a look at the details or the explanation of the case. I give you Duraware's current financial statements showing their relationship of debt, what kind of debt they have in relationship to their assets, excuse me, of their company. And then I want you to answer these 6 questions. Some of it's going to relate to the discussion we're going to have in just a few minutes. Some of it's going to relate, if you have not read chapter 24, which you probably haven't because it's for next week, read chapter 24 as your research on this type of answer. What are the various ways in which firms can be financially distressed? How can a company be in trouble? I think one answer definitely would be no cash flow or low cash flow. Losing market share. A whole variety of how many different ways companies can be financially distressed. Some of you might have lived and been part of these companies in financial distress. What does the absolute priority rule mean? Develop a priority list for Duraware that would be followed if it were to be liquidated. If you decide and recommend that this case should be liquidated, the priority rule determines who gets what of the liquidation of the assets. That's talked about in chapter 24. Why has Duraware, that's the company that's in financial trouble, attempted to get a pre-packaged bankruptcy? There's such things as you can buy a bankruptcy strategy from consultants, from people. Why have they done this? How does insolvency differ from bankruptcy? Which applies to Duraware and why? Insolvency differ from bankruptcy. Insolvency basically means I can't liquidate. It's insolvent. There's nothing. That's a little bit different than actual bankruptcy. And that can relate to this problem here, this question. If you were Dom Thompson, who's making this investment, how would you explain the differences between bankruptcy reorganization and bankruptcy liquidation? Chapter 7 and Chapter 11 of the bankruptcy law. Talked about in Chapter 24. Chapter 7 and 11 of the bankruptcy law. One is for reorg, one is to sell it off. What's the difference between those two? And should Alex vote in favor or against voluntary reorganization? Should the company figure out their own troubles themselves, or should you do something more legal, like formal bankruptcy? Explain why and perform the necessary calculations if you deem necessary. Right? Is there something that you can calculate and determine that can help in the answer of that question. So this question kind of handles the last part of our class. It does handle the last part of our class. The final form of restructuring and reorganization is say, yeah, we can do it. Here's why. Or no, it's time to circle the wagons and adios. Let's sell off the business. It's done. That's the final phase of a company's business life, business cycle. Dissolve the corporation, sell it off. Nobody wants to buy it. You can't restructure it. You can't reorg. Sell it off and get what you can by the absolute priority rule, who gets what as you sell out the corporation. It's kind of like the last phase. Any guys ever see the movie The Lion King, or saw the movie The Lion King? The Lion King talks about the main theme of the movie is the circle of life. The circle of life of the young lion to becoming an older lion. Well, there's a circle of life to corporations. Private, single-owned company, starting out with a business model, a business idea, then becoming successful and popular and needs capital to grow. They go public. As they go public, they now grow even bigger, going into other countries, becoming globalized in their operations. And then the business model begins to age. Competitors, market changes, products change, maybe political or social reasons why the business plan is failing. And then companies try to react to that by maybe merging, maybe being acquired, maybe finding new capital structure. And then as they come to the end of their business cycle, their cycle of life or circle of life, they maybe do one last attempt of selling off pieces of the business and maintain a core business. Or then they declare bankruptcy and either become dissolved or sell out or end their life of their organization. Now, for some companies, this takes 125 years. For other companies, it takes 5 years, 10 years. It depends on the market, the industry, the skill of the management, of how long this circle of life lasts for a corporation. This problem here about Duraware is their Duraware is coming to the end of their cycle of life, circle of life. They're coming to the end. Can they continue on in some other restructuring fashion, or is it time just to dissolve the business and liquidate? I want your opinions by answering these 6 questions about that. And put yourself in that situation. Some of you might have already been involved in your life in a bankruptcy or a restructuring or an almost a business failure. Well, hopefully you've not, but it's part of the cycle of life of companies. Everybody has to deal with that. The company that made horseless wagons, or horse-drawn wagons and carriers, they're not involved anymore. The market's changed. The world has changed. Nobody uses a horse anymore. That ended in the 1910s, 15, 20s. It's gone. That was their end of their cycle of life. So this company is coming to the end of their cycle. How can they last? Can they restructure? Or what's going to happen? So that's what this question involves. It involves the discussion I just had. It also involves reading chapter 24 and trying to put yourself in this position to answer the question, is Duraware worth more dead than alive? If you liquidate, will you get more out of the deal if you sell the assets and pay off the debt than if you try to restructure and keep it alive? Try to make that difference and try to describe that by answering those 6 questions. It's a great way of ending the course along with the electrics case. It kind of puts looking at information, using your own, each one of you have skills from your lifetime of working, being a professional. That's why this is called the MBA X program. MBA X means professionals. You're not new 25-year-old students just looking at this for the first time. You've been around in the market. You've been around in industry. You maybe have experienced some of this or you've read about it. This is something you can apply some of your expertise and your experience as a professional into this type of answer, and that's what I'll be looking for. So the first two questions are fairly easy to figure out and put together, but I want you to spend a little time, and you have plenty of time to do this over 10 days. It's due May 24th. Any questions in this regard? And again, I'll be available for 2 online sessions on Fridays to help you with any questions you might have about this case. Wow. Mr. Hassey, you're having me deal with electrics and now you throw this at me? What do you think this is? Graduate school? What do you think this is? Yvonne, you're not smiling tonight, so I'm concerned, but I think your mind is racing, trying to figure out all this stuff. And also, you probably had a long day. You probably didn't have a very good dinner, and all things are coming to the end here.
Oh, so much racing going on.
So much what? Racing? Oh, yes, I can imagine. All right. Let's get rid of this. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about Chapter 24 and bankruptcy, give you a little bit more insights to that question number 3, help you out with that. I'll be available for another session on electrics case. I'll be posting your grades for case 3. If you're still a little shaky about working on capital budgeting, we can look at your results of case 3, use that as a base to go forward. And I'll have my office hours on Friday, and also I'll be available over the weekend if you need to chat. All right. The key thing, people, is we're in our final 2 weeks. Keep it balanced. Don't postpone things and put a lot of work on top of you all at once. Try to make sure you work a little bit, but don't overburden you. Don't overstress, because some of you have other classes. Some of you have responsibility and growing pressures about what's going on in your work environment, what's going on in your family. So I take all that in consideration. So try to balance it out. If you need help in that regard, that's my job, is to get you through that. Angel, what's the name of your dog again? It's got to go to different computers. Sorry. Angel. Oh, you did a chat. Sorry. Okay, that's okay. It's Peter. What a nice name for a dog. Peter the Scotty. Is he a Scotty? What is he? You don't have to answer that. Don't worry about that. Peter. Okay, that's Peter. Peter's probably a good friend. All right. Oh, well, here we go. She did it. Oh, it's a min pin, whatever the hell that is. Okay. Peter is a min pin. I know nothing about animals. I don't have any animals. I don't stay away from animals. I got enough problems. My biggest problem is trying to keep my hair from being totally out of control. All right, there we go. Okay. Nice little job. Nice meeting Peter. Jesse, everything okay? All right. James, you all right? Darlene, no questions. You never asked any questions. Darlene, what's going on? Everything okay?
I have a headache now.
You have a headache? I can understand that, and I apologize. I'm sorry. Okay, everybody. Have a great week. Maybe see some of you on Friday. If not, maybe I'll see some of you on the weekend. If not, I'll see you next Wednesday. I think you all have a pretty good base of which to begin. I know it's a little bit overwhelming, but this is a 600 series class. I got to kick butt somehow. I got to get you. So this is I'm pushing you a little bit to do all this, and that's a good thing. Thomas, hang on, and I'll talk to you when everybody's off. And thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you. Thanks. Good work tonight. Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
Al.
Alice.
Bye.